Hi guys, today we're going to run through the tracks from our first EP titled Emergence, available on all streaming platforms, and we're just going to talk about some of the key decisions that we made, as well as sort of some of the synths and the beats involved in each track.
Right, so this is the Pro Tool session for Emergence, which is the title track of the EP and the first track on the EP as well. So with this track, it started out as it was just going to be a short intro track. Basically, it was the last one we wrote. We had all the other songs all done, and we kind of felt like we needed something a bit contrasting to kind of start the EP off as the intro. It was always intended to be a bit more organic sounding rather than having loads of synth layers. It got a little bit out of hand, I would say, and it kind of developed into a whole full-blown song. But yeah, so talking through kind of what we've got going on. For me, when we kind of discussed writing the song, I kind of thought, right, I can kind of hear this in my head a little bit. For me, I wanted to write something that was kind of a little bit in the vibe of like The Last of Us, that was using kind of folk instruments and stuff like that, rather than orchestral samples or synths that didn't sound quite so synthy, or like just piano kind of things. So we got a good mix of stuff. These top two here is they are a monochord. Sorry, words are failing me.
What is a monochord? Sorry,
that is a good question. No, so a monochord, I do know what it is. It's a big instrument, I think. Maybe less. Yeah, I can never remember which is a monochord and which is a dulcimer. So we'll leave it at that, maybe. Yeah. So this pink one here is a charango. I think it's an Argentinian stringed instrument. It's like a little guitar, basically. It might not be Argentinian, but it's definitely South American. We've got piano. We've got some choirs down here in blue, and then we've got to the part where we start to bring in the synths to kind of mesh it with a little bit with the sound of the other songs. So our bass line is this red one that fills out our low end. That's played on a Arturia CZ, and we've used a brassy patch on that to kind of give the low end, and that's brought out even more by Decapitator. I mean, that is just driving it and smashing it to really bring out the low end impact. And then the other synth we've got, this is kind of like the top line kind of embellishment. It's not like the main melody. It's another Arturia synth. We quite like the Arturia synths, as you'll probably find out. I'm going to butcher the name of this one. I think it's a Bushila easel.
Sounds about right to me.
It's this thing. I normally do not like this synth. I normally don't like it, but
it looks a little bit funny, doesn't it?
This sound was kind of exactly what we wanted. It was just something just to go on top, just to embellish what was there. So it gave us the right sound. Normally not a fan. It wouldn't be one of my go-to choices, but here we are. And then a little bit further down, so what plays the main melody is a lap steel guitar, and I that's the first time I've ever played a lap steel guitar, is when I wrote the melody for this and recorded it. It was it was fun. I had to learn to play lap steel well enough to it not sound completely terrible on the recording. It's not a plug-in. I actually went out and bought one especially.
I remember you saying that you tuned this, not because normally it would be in open tuning, but you actually tuned it just a regular 6-string.
Yeah, exactly. So I can't remember exactly what open tune it is, but normally it's in some kind of open tune. I think it's like open D or something, or open E. But I tuned it like a 6-string because, having no experience playing a lap steel guitar, I thought, well, if I tune it like a regular guitar, I'll be able to get the sound out of it. Because all I really wanted was the sound of a lap steel. Because lap steel and pedal steels, they definitely have a unique sound with the way you use a bar to slide up and down to notes that you want, rather than obviously a normal guitar. and I think if you do slide guitar, it's still not quite the same sound, just because of the differences between how a lap steel guitar works and how a regular guitar with a slide would work. But yeah, and then we've got some percussion down here. We've got timpani and snares just to kind of fill everything out.
Yeah,
with some percussion. I think that's kind of like roughly everything we used, I think.
Yeah, maybe could we hear a couple of the sort of parts in isolation just to see how they sound, and then together.
What part do you want to hear?
Maybe each bit, like kind of, because you've got like the choirs and then you got the brass and then sort of.
Yeah. So yeah, what I'll do first, I'll play the lap steel because I'm quite happy with how the lap steel turned out, considering I've never played one before. So, you know, when we recorded this, there were some limitations on how we could record it. So I just ran it DI'd straight to my audio interface, and I used Neural DSP's Archetype Pliny as the amps in.
Nice.
Probably not the go-to choice of lap steel players, but it worked. It worked well for this. And then I did have reverb on it as well, sorry.
Oh yeah.
So that's what that guitar part sounds like.
It's quite haunting.
For me that was kind of an important part of it, because that really, like I said at the start, I was kind of inspired a bit by soundtracks like The Last of Us for this. And that use of like the guitar is an important part of that. So that was kind of, for me, that like was really the icing on the cake.
Is there kind of a Red Dead Redemption kind of vibe as well, sort of the countryside?
Yeah. It was that kind of whole, I guess that whole kind of aesthetic as well was kind of part of the inspiration to it. Like definitely that Red Dead Redemption 2. Yeah. And it's not too dissimilar in terms of the soundtrack for that as well. It uses a lot of American folk instruments in the soundtrack as well, being that it's, you know, set in the Wild West.
Yeah.
Choir.
Yeah, that gives it I want to call it kind of a humanity. When you're using a lot of electronic, sort of very clean instruments, you need to add in that sort of bit of icing on the cake.
Yeah, for all of this, apart from my lap steel, it's all using VSTs. But that was part of the choice, was to use VSTs that weren't synths. It was to use as many organic or like acoustic ones that are from acoustic instruments as possible. I mean, we've got a call. Actually, let's quickly play like one of the synth ones. Let's play the brass one.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so that's obviously the first part of that.
It's quite percussive.
So when we did that, yeah, it was kind of when I sort of like edged out the chords for this, and then we went through sounds. It was kind of trying to find something that, in a way, is doing the job of what those parts of an orchestra might do. It's adding that weight to the low end for a start, which is obviously something we needed, particularly in this song, because everything else is very mid or high range. And also, like you say, it's got that percussive quality to it as well. So it is adding some impact and kind of drive to it, rather than everything being very kind of smooth on their attack.
I'll talk about the percussion now for a bit. So basically, I think that at the time I sent over WAV files, so the direct sound recordings of basically the free version of Spitfire's BBC Orchestral, which in itself, miraculous what you get for basically not paying anything. It's phenomenal. And so based on the aesthetic and everything else of the rest of the track, this folksy kind of old school potential vibe, to me, in my mind, that's usually tied to kind of the military, watching a lot of films where there's kind of almost cowboys and bits and pieces. They've usually had some form of military experience or training, so that's just go with your gut. That's the first thing. So the timps, I'm just looking at the sort of the WAV and the waveform there, very sort of straight ahead, basically on the beat, and then underneath that you've got sort of a marching snare, so you kind of got the full sort of marching orchestra kind of feel. And
because these timpanis, to start with particularly as well, they're like just punctuation points, and then this marching snare comes in and it's really rigid and obviously marching, but then as it progresses with the rest of the track, it gets a bit looser and the timps embellish more here, and I think it kind of fits the track kind of perfectly. It complements what's there really well, and it's, like you said, it's aimed for a certain thing as well, and I think that's kind of, you hit what you aimed for with the march and snare.
That's good. Yeah, glowing review. And is that a gong at the end?
Yeah, so this is like my favourite part. It's one of my favourite parts of the whole track is this gong. I think it's a gong. I will just play it quickly to make sure. I mean, I can't hear that.
No, me neither. But
that's because it's going through a bus and the bus is muted. So now it should come through.
Yeah, that's very gongy. It's either a gong or a cymbal that we just like completely tuned down or something.
Yeah, it's something big and lovely. I don't know, for me, every time I hear it, I'm like, I really like that. Just because it reminds me of Halo for some reason.
Yeah.
I think it's the big gong, and the choir. Like to me, that's like, that just reminds me of the Halo 2 soundtrack from when I was a kid. But
so on sort of the theme of Emergence, it's because the track is effectively cut into two sections. There's the bit that we've kind of just described with all of the synths and all that loveliness, and then that gong allows the second section of the track to effectively emerge as per the name of the song, because then we go into there's a bit that we sort of sound designed, so I think that's worth looking at a little bit.
Yeah, that's these two choir parts here. So if I just play like a bit of them, you can hear how they transform, and then we'll talk about it.
So I think that the idea with that was just to, the concept that underlines all of this, which we're great believers in, keeping it subtle, leaving just enough clues there for people to hopefully reach similar conclusions to us about what the whole thing's about. But you've got all of these very organic countryside cowboyish sort of themes at the start with the lap steel and all the rest of it, and then because we've got this sort of mech character in the background, it's the almost the organic sound of the choir becomes digital and breaks up, so it's sort of like a slight breakdown of humanity and sort of thing.
Yeah. And so from like a production-y kind of point of view, if I just unfreeze these, we have got some. I think there's automation on the choir part for many things, but I think in a way, like you say, it's like the breakdown of humanity. And when we processed it to sound like that in a way, that's kind of also how we processed it from a production point of view, because it's the Eric Whittaker choir library from Spitfire Audio, which I just never thought a choir could live inside my computer, but they do.
Do you have to feed them?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great plugin aside from everything else, but I kind of loosely approached it like mixing an actual choir, even though I've got everything stacked up on here rather than using buses to their full extent for some of the stuff. I've just got some subtle EQ to bring out a bit, to make them sound a bit fuller and bring out some of the air as well. Multi-band compression, reverb. So what you would do to like kind of mix vocals or choir or whatever it is, but that effects that comes in when it starts to become digitized, that's put on after everything using isotope vocal synth. So that's on the reverb as well, and I did that intentionally. So the reverb was affected by the vocal synth, but I think that really kind of emphasised like the breakdown of humanity, because it's taking what it would sound like as its complete source and then digitising it with the synth, like adding that effect to it and breaking it down.
Yeah. So is that like a vocoder, but just like on steroids?
It's a yeah, essentially. I mean, it's a vocal synthesizer, so it's like synthesizers that you can use, but specifically targeted at vocals. So it's, there is a vocoder built into it. You've got a computer. It's called CompuVox, which is supposed to be sounded. It's like it's through like a computer speaking, which obviously it kind of does. You got a talk box. You got like ring modulation, like loads of effects and stuff you can put on it as well. All we used was a vocoder and the CompuVox. So. But yeah, it was some of the stuff we've done production wise is approaching it like it is the concept of it, like in that sense. So instead of kind of saying, oh, how would I do this to make it sound the best possible, it's like, well, okay, so it's, the idea of this is it's like the transformation of it into something digital, or like it is like the breakdown of humanity, or like technology kind of overpowering it. So that's all I've done essentially, is I've just gone, right, well, that's the easiest way to get to that in a production sense on this like stack of inserts here.
With a lot of these sorts of things, I'll come up with some absolutely wacky description. I want it to sound more orange, as helpful as that, and then we work backwards from that and come up with something. Yeah, quite often it's like, well, this is kind of the concept, if we have a concept. Some of the stuff is just, oh, that sounds cool. Like for me, sometimes that's enough of a reason for it to be a song. It's like, I like how that sounds, which is very simple. And I know a lot of people, they're always inspired by something or something else, but a lot of the time we come up with the concept and then it's working back from there in kind of practical ways like just described.